tourist is someone who is just only collecting experiences. So visiting, eating, seeing, and pilgrim is a different kind of person who is concentrated of the value of what is really important in human life. So this is a different attitude, even if they are doing the same.
Welcome to another episode of the Spe Salvi Institute podcast. I'm Bobby Mixon. Unfortunately, we don't have Andrew Petiprin with us this week, but I'm so excited to have with us Father Piotr Roszak. Father Piotr Roszak, I've actually corresponded with Father Piotr for a number of years now. So it's actually, instead of meeting in the flesh, it's actually nice to finally meet via Zoom. But Father Piotr Roszak is somebody that I've actually in the back of my mind the entire time we've been doing this project. Particularly for his work on pilgrimage, but also for his work on Thomas Aquinas. So before we get into things, Father Roszak, I just like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much, Robert, for invitation. It's really a pleasure to converse about Camino, pilgrimage, and Thomas Aquinas, of course. Thank you for your interest in my fields of investigation.
Absolutely. So just to kind of familiarize all of you with Father Piotr. Father Piotr is the ordinary professor at Nicholas Copernicus University in Torun, Poland, actually the hometown of Nicholas Copernicus, and also actually the home of some pretty good gingerbread cookies, I believe.
That's true.
Yeah. And he's also an associated professor at the University of Navarra, Pamplona, Spain, where he obtained in 2019 his PhD. He's the ordinary member of the Pontifical Academy of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. He's the editor-in-chief of the journal Scientia et Fides, dedicated to science-religion debate, and director of the series Scholastica Torrenicia, where the Polish translations of medieval biblical commentaries are published. And together with Mateusz Czarnowski, who's a Dominican, he's the leading Opera Omnia project of the St. Thomas Aquinas in Poland. In addition to this, and his research in science and religion and philosophy, Father Piotr is a specialist in the history of the Spanish Mozarabic rite, the analytic theology and phenomena of pilgrimage in Santiago de Compostela. And also, finally, he's the member of the committee of the experts on the Camino of Santiago, Spain. So on this theme of pilgrimage, Father, how did you first get interested in pilgrimage?
In my case, all started with my living in Spain, because I studied at the University of Navarra, as you mentioned. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. And as I was a parish priest in a small village called Villamayor de Monjardin, around 30 kilometers from Pamplona to the south. And I was surprised by a growing number of pilgrims doing El Camino. So the pilgrimage towards Compostela, where the tomb of St. James the Great, one of the apostles of Jesus Christ, is. And I was curious about their motivation and particularly how to help them to live this experience with Christian spirit. So as a priest, I was involved in several pastoral celebrations, activities, actions, and trying to show that this physical activity is something more than a tourist experience. So I was knowing the reality of the pilgrimage from very close, and I think it was a starting point in my scientific interest of pilgrimages and Camino in particular way, because it's somehow related. I remember evenings with pilgrims staying in our albergue, the shelter that belonged to the parish. And speaking about the history of every pilgrim's motivations, even also their main spiritual goals, because they had always a kind of intention. People, some familiar situation, a complicated issue to be solved. So they are trying to live this experience as something that is helping to be close to God, and in this way to find a light for their own life. So I think also that it was for my personal experience really a great invitation to be also a part of their pilgrimage, because we are not we are not only pilgrims when we go, and I think also when we meet pilgrims, when we help them, when we talk with them, so we are somehow part of their spiritual journey, and in this way we can call also as pilgrims. So some years after this first pastoral experience with pilgrims, I decided to go to Compostela from Navarre, and every year with different people. So it was not like one shot and in 1 month I was in Compostela, but yeah, it lasts a little more than normally. So every year with different people, friends, people from my parish, from Poland, from Spain. So in general, it started in this way.
That's fascinating. You know, growing up in America, I never went on pilgrimage. It was always driving, but my first walking pilgrimage was with actually it was after I got married to my wife who's from Poland.
Yeah.
And in Chicago, they have a pilgrimage every August. It's a 2-day pilgrimage to a little shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa in Indiana. But
Yeah.
I thought I would be fine, but I was nearly dying after just a 2-day walk. And I was so impressed though, because you learn a lot about what does it mean to be a Christian simply by walking. And there's so many of these concrete practices that many of us, like, you know, I'm sure many Catholics like me growing up in America never participated in. But it's amazing how merely just by walking to a shrine, in some ways that's a great opening to the faith. But even for people who, like you mentioned, people who their intention, they don't come as pilgrims necessarily, but they're seeking something. I was reading that after COVID, uh, I think Santiago de Compostela had the most pilgrims they've ever had before. And one of my friends, actually he's an American like me, married to a Polish woman. He lives in Krakow. And he went on pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela. And he said most of the people he met were not even Christian. But he said it was such an interesting experience. So do you have any interesting stories about, I guess, on these journeys of meeting these people?
I think I totally agree with you, because and your friends, that this is a great experience not only for Christian Catholics but also for people who are giving some first steps towards something more, the meaning of their life. So they are searching for something really important in our culture that is not helping them to find such an answer. So they are going on pilgrimage with questions. And I remember many stories about pilgrims' experience after reaching Santiago, and they are still with questions, but with more light. So they have some first answers to the big questions of human life, and they are trying to understand better the Catholic heritage that you can find every day on the Camino, because you are visiting churches, chapels, cathedrals, you are seeing people praying on rosary, etc. So participating in the mass and the blessing of pilgrims. So every of this spiritual help, I think, is something that is helping people to discover more and more. And I think it's common for Camino pilgrims that the change that pilgrimage is producing is coming not exactly in the moment when you are in the Cathedral of Santiago, but maybe after, when you come back to your home and you are realizing that I think differently. So the mental change, as we call it in theology, metanoia, so the conversion, is something that is happening inside, in our soul, in our hearts, in our way how we relate to each other, how we see our duties, obligations. And I think it was a funny story about a marriage that the husband and woman, that they pilgrimages together, but they were in a very different and difficult moment of their common life. They were thinking about separation, and this was like the last chance to be together. And they told me that after reaching Santiago, when we stay in the bar taking coffee, and they explained me every day of their pilgrimage to Santiago, that they had a confused view of other person. So they were evaluating each other from the very wrong angle. So thinking on egoistic perspective. So I should receive from another something. And on the Camino, they discover their own relationship from a very, very deep perspective. So they are for each other. They are on the pilgrimage on the earth. So this is something more than reaching point A or B on the map. So it is going to heaven, is going together as a matrimony to God. So it was a really great discover of their own vocation, and what is the main problem in their relationship. So I think it's a great discovery, so-called Camino effect. I realize that this is even in many books, that it's not like the miracles that occur in the shrine of Santiago, no? Because even when we go to the history, let me just make a brief reference to the Codex Calixtinus, which is the first guide of the Camino. When in the Middle Ages, the news on Camino, on Santiago was really very popular among Christians at that time. So the main reason for pilgrimage was not healing from physical disease or miracles, but it was a liberation of human soul. And I think that Santiago is really a patron of such a situation when we are slave of something, and we can discover the problem, and with the help of God's grace, we can overcome all these obstacles on the way to God during our pilgrimage during this life. So I think that two main motives for a pilgrimage that was mentioned in such Codex Calixtinus, I mean orationis causa and penitentia, so for praying and to make a penitence, is still valid also for today's pilgrims, although in different name, because maybe when you ask people, why are you here? So what's your main motivation to do Camino? I think that they will not respond that penitence like in the Middle Ages. But what's the meaning of penitence? Penitence is ability to be apart from the sin, from the evil. So constantly saying no to what is harming me in my way. So this attitude towards what is danger, I think is still present among pilgrims today, because they want to be a free person, free from obstacles, but also free for something more. So two dimensions of the freedom in the case of pilgrims are still very present. And the prior which is different in each pilgrim. So I saw people praying a rosary, attending mass, and praying together in small groups, but also people who were praying in their spirits. So it was a nice sign that pilgrims are totally different from tourists. In this perspective, they are searching for something bigger.
That's interesting. I was reading the other day that a little short text about like anthropology and what is the human being. And one of the definitions that the person gave was that the human being is constantly on the way to something. And so this movement forward, without necessarily abandoning the past, but bringing the beginning and the present to this ultimate end is something that we essentially need as human beings, but also we need to do that with others as a society. So it's just so interesting too that I don't know if this is right, Father, but in the Gospel of Luke, I heard, could be wrong, that it's constantly a journey just to Jerusalem. It's always moving. The movement is always upward. And then all of a sudden you go back to Galilee. And it's interesting to me that just the phenomenon of walking, but walking somewhere is you find that even in the way that philosophers used to I don't want to say hold their class, but they used to just go on walks. And you think of Socrates just walking around the city. And then you even heard about somebody like Nietzsche, who he felt like he did his best thinking just on long walks. And we have this even in the American tradition, and it's something a little bit maybe different than pilgrimage, but just merely being on the move is something that's like, I don't know, intrinsic to us. But perhaps maybe Christianity in a way, really, since it's the truth of who it illumines the truth of who we are and elevates it, is just falling into that. So, I mean, Father, what is some of the like I see in some of your work, you mentioned the Polish, I don't know if you classify him as a sociologist or philosopher, but Zygmunt Bauman and his notion of liquid modernity. And also he has a lot of stuff about, I don't know if it's the contrast between being a pilgrim and a tourist. And so is this kind of this, if you want to say, not seeing one's life or even history or even the cosmos as going towards something, but just kind of taking things in along the way without having any meaning. What is your engagement with Zygmunt Bauman about?
You mentioned a lot of very, very interesting topics relating to anthropology of pilgrimage, and particularly on teleology. So, because this is the final end, the ultimate goal, telos in Greek, is saying that we are moved by the telos, with the goal that we identify, that we try to reach. So maybe the very good sign of a culture is that it's showing these goals for human being. And here I think is very inspiring the reading of Karol Wojtyła, the Pope John Paul II book, The Person and Act, so Osoba i Czyn in Polish, when the Pope was mentioning the scholastic notion ens in fieri. So the human being is someone who is in fieri, in progress towards the ultimate form. So our decision, every act is providing us the opportunity to shape to give this form, final form of our life. So yeah, it's true that we lost, maybe in general terms in our culture, this perspective of goals, and we concentrate on mediums, so in how to reach, so the manners of doing something, but not about the goals. And culture is something really that is helping us to see the horizon of where we are going. And here, the Bauman thoughts, I think it's confusing a little, because I think he was not right in saying that pilgrims are deaf and we have only tourists in our world. Because when you think about pilgrims, that they are doing several days, their road to Santiago or to different other shrines in Christianity, for instance. So they are searching for the goal. So they are moved by this first cause of our activity. So here I see that tourist is someone who is just only collecting experiences. So visiting, eating, seeing, and pilgrim is a different kind of person who is concentrated of the value of what is really important in human life. So this is a different attitude, even if they are doing the same. I mean, walking, seeing, making conversation, etc., etc. It reminds me from Aristotelian philosophy. Let me mention this point, because Aristotle was encouraging people to think on materia and forma. So to see reality in these two perspectives. And I think in the case of pilgrimage, we have also materia. So what constitutes the act of walking, going towards some destination. But at the same time, there is a strong difference between tourists and pilgrims on the level of form. So what is your motivation to go there? So not to make some photos of the Cathedral of Santiago, of the Tomb of St. James, right? So not only to leave something during these days on the pilgrimage, but also to reach the destination, to be close to what is really inspiring source for my identity. So there is a strong motivation. And here I think Bauman is just saying us that, yeah, please, that we should be careful about our deep motivation. And I'm trying during my investigation on the Camino, some questionnaires that we prepare for pilgrims, just trying to understand what's their motivation. So we realized that they don't answer always the main motivation of their journey. So this is something that is somehow hidden. It's not for the direct recognition, but should be seen in a heart of the pilgrims. So maybe this is also a topic about or the virtue of religion, because when we evaluate that Camino de Santiago is a religious route or a Catholic pilgrimage, so what's the meaning of this sentence? So what we mean by religious in the context of pilgrims or tourists? So I think here is very helpful Aquinas once again, because he treated religion as a moral virtue related to justice. So when we are in debt with someone, so in this case with God, so to be religious for Aquinas is to link all our daily activities with the ultimate goal. So we can call religious breakfast, conversation, reading, work, always when this is linked somehow to the ultimate goal of our existence. And this is religious in a sense. So I think it's helpful to see this pilgrimage in many cases of contemporary people doing Camino, even if they don't recognize directly that I'm doing for religious reasons, but if they go for the ultimate end, I see in them at least a search for this big religious motivation. Maybe we are living in a culture that is against this direct recognition, so that they know about it, they prefer to be a little hidden, but they are having this search for religious motivation in their heart.
Interesting. You know, I grew up next to a Muslim family, and actually it was funny. It was I used to play basketball with the boys growing up, and they used to have all these questions because they knew we were Catholics about, and in fact, their questions for me awakened in me a desire to know more about my own faith. But I remember one time they were mentioning about, their practice of Islam, of going on pilgrimage eventually to Mecca. And I never really heard about this before. And to me, it was so interesting because they said, "Oh yes, that's like if a Muslim can do it, all of they have to make a pilgrimage." And I felt like, "Oh wow!" So that's connecting all Muslims around the world to this kind of central point, and it's a journey with others, and so it builds this community. Um, it's also a very personal thing, and I felt like, wait a minute, deprived. I didn't know about all these pilgrimages that Catholics can do, but I felt deprived in the sense of that, because I felt like actually that would give some structure and order and direction in one's life. But yet
Yeah.
everything they did in some ways was ordered to that, even the direction in which they prayed. And for me, I this is like this when pilgrimage started to kind of, you know, I don't know, at least for me, it seemed like one of the most important phenomena that no one is talking about. And so, Father, do you see though, like with this, you always hear these accounts, right? And I'm kind of sick of these accounts of history going like maturing to the point of where we all just then become tourists. And I just wonder, like, no, like, wait a minute, it's not just the Middle Ages that people were pilgrims and not like, okay, looking at other societies and saying, well, they're kind of in the past with this pilgrimage thing, and eventually they'll move beyond this. But it seems like more and more people, like you've said, through culture, are waking up to the sense that this is just what we are as human beings.
Yeah, I think that many people are really surprised by this phenomenon of return to pilgrimage, as someone call it. So, because people are once again religious in some sense, but also they are once again pilgrims, and in the very medieval sense of the word. So, going for the same motivation to the shrines, different shrines, not only to directly for obtaining grace, but also for discovering something important about their own life. And this physical activity, walking, is really important in this point. I remember from the late Middle Ages the discussion of on the so-called devotio moderna. It was a school of spirituality that underlined that the most important thing is the spiritual experience, even if you are not able to move to a physical place. So you can stay at your home and live the same experience like doing pilgrimage to Compostela. So it was a reaction from historical point of view to some abuses of physical activities in the pilgrimages. So because we can imagine people who were more concentrated on the external aspect of pilgrimage, just to be there. So it doesn't matter what I'm living during the pilgrimage. So it was a reaction. But I think that we need to combine both perspectives. So to maintain a physical activity, because it's different when you with the back going every day 20, 30 kilometers seeing countryside, seeing people talking to each other, praying, having time for your own reflection, and really also to be tired. This experience that we are not machines, but we are human beings, and we can be tired. And in this tire, we can find something illuminating for our self-understanding. I think it's a great point of the Camino. And as you say, as you said, I think also that really a pilgrimage is a consolidating experience for many people. So we need a time, space, period in our life when we go to the center, even from different angles, and we can meet each other what is the source of our identity. And John Paul II in 1982 in Compostela precisely was saying this message to young people in all the world, that please come back to Compostela. We still we are hearing this voice of John Paul II, and at that year, I think it was 20 or 30 people going to Compostela. Yeah, but now, as you said, after COVID, we have 400,000 pilgrims going to Compostela. So in 40 years, we have a big growth of pilgrims. So I think it's a sign, and this impact of pilgrimages on Christian Catholic life is really important. I try to encourage every Catholics that I meet. So please go to pilgrimage to Częstochowa in Polish case. But it's different experience, because when you go to Częstochowa, normally you go in different groups, well prepared. This is different than individual pilgrimage that you are doing on the Camino. So, but the experience is the same. The communitas, so the community with the church, we are visiting different communities on the Camino. We are receiving some help from them, but also we are received. And I think this, the Spanish term, acogida, so to be received and to receive people. And I think it's a fundamental attitude of any Catholic. So, so we should permit God to receive us and to receive each other within a church. So it's a lesson that we are receiving from the Camino, from every pilgrimage.
It's amazing too, you know, like two things. You mentioned Częstochowa, and the other day, I believe it might be in Memory and Identity, where John Paul II talks about, you know, his identity as a Pole. I mean, everybody should read that book, because it's amazing. John Paul II, his knowledge of Polish history is just on display in that book. But Poland, the heart of Poland, is Częstochowa.
That's true.
I mean, the Madonna, I mean, and the pilgrimage is part of the history and identity of Poland. When my wife and I got married, we unfortunately we didn't have time to walk from Podlasia all the way to Częstochowa, but right away we actually made our way to Częstochowa. And it was, for me, such a meaningful, if you want to say, honeymoon, because and in some ways it was not only the start of our marriage, but also partially for me, I felt like I was brought into Poland in a way by going to Częstochowa.
Yeah.
But
yeah, in the case, let me just mention that precisely was the case of John Paul II, that his historical experience of Poland after the Second World War and Cardinal Wyszyński, the Blessed Wyszyński idea to integrate once again Poland, to be close to each other after changing borders, new situation, reconciliations, etc., etc. So he said, we should do it in Częstochowa, in the house of our mother, Our Lady of Częstochowa. So when we go from Szczecin, Podlasie, Kraków, Rzeszów, Wrocław, to one point, which is a spiritual capital of Poland, Częstochowa. So we will find an answer how to live, how to relate to each other, so how to organize social life, because the message from Częstochowa was not individual. It was not counseling people how to live better, how to reach a well-being. Yes, of course, this is the impact of grace on our human nature. So it should be noted that we are living in grace, but still it's a social message that was used by John Paul II in Compostela for in our regional context for the European societies. So seeing that there is a movement towards integration of many European countries, he said, okay, that's wonderful, but without background, Christian background, the value background, it's impossible to construct any that will survive difficulties. So that was, I think, the historical experience of John Paul II in Poland, that he said that it's also a sign for the universal church. It was the idea of John Paul that I'm a pope, but God wanted to share my Polish experience with the universal church.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was looking at the map of all of the routes, or all of the pilgrimage paths to Compostela, going all the way to East Poland, and it looked like actually the veins of Europe as like kind of like one organism in a way, connected. And
this is a main street of Europe. Let me mention one slogan that I heard, because so we can recognize ourselves as living on the same street. So you have neighbors on the street when you live. So when you realize that, okay, the way of St. James, crossing Poland, and now in Poland we have around 7,000 kilometers of Camino, with three main routes: Via Baltica, Camino Polacco, Via Regia on the south. So we recognize that we are living in a common space. It's the same street with different buildings, maybe, but customs, manner of living, but still it's the same main street of Europe, going to the source, which is the Christian tradition. And I think, that's amazing when you discover this, going to shrines, different shrines, because also when we go to historical documents on the Camino, so it's important to see that where Codex Calixtinus mentions Santiago, is saying that on the way to Compostela, you should visit some places, and this is a tomb of different sense. So there is a shrines on intermediary shrines, we can say, that you should visit, and this is somehow a preparation to the final destination of the pilgrimage, but still very important. So these small shrines, local shrines, are very important on the Camino. So visiting churches and having this sense of community with universal church, I think it's crucial here.
Yeah, it's amazing. Because like where my wife and I live by Kraków, when we first moved to our place, I was walking around and I found this path, and then I saw the actual the shell of from Camino. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I saw the map, and it goes, and I mean, but individual shrines. I think in Kraków, there you have, I believe it might be a stop by the Dominicans with Saint Jacek, his shrine there, and then it goes all the way to Kalwaria Żebrowska, and it is. I encourage everybody to do that. But Father, could you also say something too? Because I've heard that pilgrimage, these shrines like Chartres Cathedral, even Olotting in Germany, there is a revival there too. I think in France they had like, I think, the highest number of pilgrims to Chartres Cathedral this past year. So it's interesting to see, like that you said, we're all on the same street, but yet these shrines that are these national shrines are actually having a little bit of a revival.
Exactly. And this is integrated within a general framework of Christian perspective on pilgrimage. So it's not how to say, the competence of between shrines, who is bigger, who can attract more people to the shrines, but it's a different perspective that our map is constructed up on the base of these special places that are having meaning. And here maybe this is a important word, meaning, because when you visit shrines, cathedral, and you are maybe not discovering new things, new histories, but you are receiving meaning for your own efforts, perspectives, thoughts, etc. So this is, I think, a common experience of pilgrims to Chartres, as you said, to Aquisgrán, Aachen, contemporary. So it was a very important center of pilgrimage. Still, that we have three main pilgrimage center, so-called peregrinaciones mayores, which is Jerusalem, Rome, and Santiago de Compostela. And as we know, Dante Alighieri was mentioning that there are three different types of pilgrims going to each of these three shrines. Peregrinus is those, or peregrini, they are those who are going to Santiago. Romeri, those who are going to Rome. And Palmeri, this is different name for those who are going to Jerusalem. So having these three centers, it was like a worldview for Christians, that this world is like a sacrament for something more. So you shouldn't stop at the material level of your perception of reality, but like in the case of sacraments. So we are receiving something that is physically possible to be described in different ways. Like in the baptism, we have water, but still it's not simply water. No, there is a spiritual effect behind this water. So maybe a pilgrimage was teaching pilgrims that, okay, you are living this experience as something more. And that's why I remember that church fathers are using the term sacraments also for not only 7 signs, sacramental signs that we have now in the catechism, but also for pilgrimage, for salt, for many human experience that are helping us to go to another dimension. So to be close to Christ, because sacrament is binding us with our Lord. So I think this is important. And when we would like to match a little the pilgrimage, the effect of the effort, so maybe this spiritual calculation, if we are closer to our Lord, so it's a main question.
That's interesting. Yeah, because you think in Our Lady of Czestochowa, you have the icon, and then in Chartres you have I believe the relics.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the sacramentum.
In the case of Santiago, you have the tomb of St. James as relics, right? And this search for relics was important because it was a material sign that Christianity is not a legend or something unhistorical, but is based on historical events. And I think it's also important for people. And I remember many people surprised that, this is a really a relics from the apostle of Jesus Christ. So the friend of the Lord, like in the case of St. James. So when I celebrate a mass close to the tomb, so I feel like I'm very close to the friend of Jesus, and I have the physical relics of these people. So it's not like my imagination, etc. No, it's a historical background for my faith. So I can believe because it happened, not because I have a big imagination. So I think it's very helpful for people, and maybe this is like apologetics of pilgrimage. We talked today about the anthropology. Yeah, this is anthropological pilgrimage from one perspective, but also is like in the case of apologetics. So is showing reasons that we have reasons to believe in Christ, in God. And these reasons we can discover doing pilgrimage. So I think it's important also from this perspective.
Yeah. Now, Father, moving to somebody that you specialize in, who I'm sure in his life made some kind of pilgrimage, Thomas Aquinas. You think about the culture, the medieval, like the High Middle Ages, and somebody who is definitely influenced by Thomas Aquinas's theology. You think of Dante and the way he sees things moving through Inferno, then through the Purgatorio to the Paradiso. But how does pilgrimage, if it does, play a role in the thinking of Thomas Aquinas?
It's an interesting question, thank you. But I think that the whole Summa Theologia, the main work of Aquinas, an attempt to systematize a Christian doctrine, theology, is like a pilgrimage. So we start from one point and we are trying to reach another one. So in the case of Summa, we can think what's the best starting point for human reflection on God, my life, salvation. So Aquinas is starting with God as a source of reality, creator. And the structure of pilgrimage is also present in a manner how we are reaching the great mysteries of our faith, how to start, how to proceed, and how to reach the final step, which is our union with Christ. So I think Aquinas, a part of his physical pilgrimage, because he was very active when we see his life in the medieval Europe. He was in Paris, in Colonia, in Naples, Rome, Oviedo, etc. So constantly going from one side to another, etc. So from one point, he was a pilgrim visiting churches, cathedrals, shrines, praying there. But when we go to the same notion of peregrinus, for instance, in his theology, we found different meaning. From one side, he's very familiar with the Roman law, and this is also a connection to Augustine, who was saying that we are peregrini on this earth. Peregrini in Roman law was those who are not citizens. So the contrary to be citizens. So we are not citizens because we are still going to our patria, our homeland, so heaven. And we shouldn't be here for always, but for the moment. So as a step towards our final destination. And this is one meaning, very juridical, legal notion of peregrinus, without rights, people who are not citizens. So we are on the journey, crossing Roman Empire, like in the case of times of Augustine, so going to another direction. But from another point of view, peregrinus for Aquinas is, of course, the person who is visiting shrines and someone who is identified by values and is remembering these values to the people who are seeing that person. What I mean, when, for instance, when you see people that is having not so many things and can survive every year during a month going to Compostela, just only having few things, 8 kilo on their back, and you see, okay, I need so many things in my life. I cannot imagine a situation without iron or different things, TV, etc. So these people don't need many things to live. So I think in this sense, Aquinas is saying the pilgrim is a witness of the values that maybe we have lost in our daily life. So it's remembering, please feel like a pilgrim in your decisions, in your everyday duties. So I think it's a great notion of peregrinus that we can discover in Aquinas.
Yeah, it's amazing too with the evangelical counsels, poverty, chastity, and obedience. It seems that that lends itself well too to being a pilgrim. And you think of many of the great saints like
Hmm.
Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Ignatius of Loyola, seeing the, I mean, ultimately wanting to go on pilgrimage to
For them was important also to feel that you are in the hands of God. So the providence, how you feel the providence of God in our life. So when you don't know where you will sleep for the next stage of your pilgrimage, because you don't know on the Camino. I can go
yeah.
10 kilometers or 20. You never know. So maybe this is like to, okay, I want to decide about every detail in my life. So when I go, what time I take coffee, with whom I will speak, etc. So here you don't know. You don't know who will you meet. So maybe the very simple prayer to God is that, okay, I'm your hands. So you are my providence. And providence means that you see better than I. So what's the goal of my life? So I'm at your disposal. Please provide what is necessary for me, and I will accept it. So it's a great school to believe and in God, but also to trust on what He is providing us every day, and what maybe at the beginning we see as unnecessary, not useful. But when the day is going to the end, so we see that, wow, this experience was very important for me. I learned something more about myself, my family, my values. So yeah, that's I think definitely it's an experience of God's providence in our Catholic life.
The Father, kind of bringing this interview to a close. I'm sure many people are thinking, um, what are like practically speaking, do you have any advice on like where I should begin? Which route should I take? Should I go? I don't know. Should I do the whole thing? Should I go all the way? Start. I'm here in Podlasha right now, and I remember a couple of years ago, my wife met a fellow who said he was walking with his big backpack, and she said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to Santiago de Compostela." I wonder if I think he did make it there because she eventually saw him again. He made it. But
Yeah.
do you have any advice where somebody should begin?
Yeah, you know that from Middle Ages, people started at their home, so it was a real situation. So I go to Compostela, and of course, I think that now we need, because I have some friends that they did the Camino from their home here in Poland. It
Mm.
lasted around 100 days, so 3 months is from
Oh,
Poland.
wow.
Yeah, so this is not. You should have a long holidays if you decide to do it. But from practical point of view, I will recommend a period that is more than 1 week. Okay, it all depends on our possibilities. Yeah, but I think to have an experience, to be tired, to even, because when you start, everything is calling your attention: food, people, and monuments, etc. You are making so many photos, and when you see photos from the Camino, so at the beginning a lot of photos, but then every day less and less and less, because you are thinking another thing. So maybe it's not good to have only 1 week, but 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And yeah, having this time, you can see where to start. I would recommend from Pamplona or from Burgos when you are going on the Camino Frances, the French way, the most popular and maybe the most historical, because you are going through the cathedrals like León, Burgos, etc. But also it's very popular among pilgrims now, the Portuguese way, so from Porto, around 10 days, 2 weeks, depends on possibilities. So maybe, yeah, to start in Spain and to have this experience of shelters, living together, praying together in the evenings, yeah, receiving blessings after the mass. So it's all part of a Camino experience that is really very helpful in our spiritual life. So I highly recommend to do Camino to all our listeners, and I'm sure that this will be a great time for you to discover your roots, and for the same time to be a consolidated. We need this recollecting things that are still a little in different places, and to have it in the center. And this is experience on the Camino, which is a meeting for with the God's grace, because it's a grace that is hidden, I think, in the tiredness and meeting people, and for all what happened on the Camino. So as people say, good way, have a good way. So buen camino, because it's a wishing to all pilgrims from the very beginning.
Well, I look forward to eventually making my first Camino, perhaps maybe next year.
That would be nice.
Yes, but Father, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Your work has, first of all, meant a lot to me, and I hope listeners, please go read much more of Father Piotr Roszak's articles. Many of the articles about the Camino and also biblical Thomism are available online. And I believe some of your books actually are translated into English. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And also one of our close friends, Dr. Matthew Levering, I believe, has done some work with Father Piotr Roszak as well. So
Yes.
eventually, I'd love to have you on again someday, Father Piotr, where we can maybe talk a little bit more about biblical Thomism.
That would be nice. Thank you very much because yeah, the biblical Thomas is also that I'm sharing with Matthew Levering and Jürgen Wiegen this
Yes.
attempt to discover Aquinas through biblical commentaries and his manner of doing theology, which is integrating a Bible, sacred scripture, and philosophy, and our human cognition.
Well, eventually, maybe, yeah, someday we'll have to have you on to talk about that. But to our listeners, thank you so much for listening
Thank you.
today. Remember to go visit our website, spesalviinstitute.com, where we have not only articles, but also a great collection of other interviews, such as this one today. And also, we have many other great interviews scheduled in advance as well. We'll eventually be talking to Tracy Rowland. So please be on the outlook for that interview coming up, and many others. And to our hosts, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, live in hope.